Good morning, friends. My name is Dr. Tapun Trivedi, and today I will be the speaker for our webinar on DSP-based control of power electronic system. Well, as an electrical engineer, we are aware of number of applications uh, like there are renewable energy, digital motor control, lighting, uh, sensing and control, automotive application, and digital power. In renewable energy, normally we consider solar power inverters, wind power inverters. In digital motor control, we have white goods like washing machine. We have white goods like washing machine, industrial drives, power tools, and e-bike. E-bike, of course, electric vehicle. It will require the control of motor. Um, lighting, we go for LED lighting as well as other street lightings and other applications. And in automotive, we go for hybrid electric vehicles and electric power steering and other things. In digital power also, for example, we use AC/DC rectifiers for telecom and server applications. There are few DC/DC converters which require precise control and uninterruptible power supplies. Now, all these applications have some common demand from the processing point of view. And those demands and the controller which addresses all these demands will be discussed in this webinar. So the the controller which addresses this is a series of C2000. Now C2000 is a very generic name given to the series of controllers by Texas Instrument. Why? Because they are lowest cost for those applications, and they can be easily used in control systems for those applications. These control systems include motor control, storage, digital control systems, and power supply control. Now, let us take an example of a drive, a basic drive, which we all study now, because there are a number of participants who are students of undergraduate, and as well as there are few participants who are from industry. So I will try to address all of them. Well, so there is one block diagram, a basic block diagram, which we study in power electronics and drives. And that is, there is an inverter, which is taking DC power supply and it is feeding to the induction motor. Now, the speed of this induction motor is to be controlled. Now, to control that speed, we are trying to control the modulation index as well as frequency of the voltage source inverter. But for that, there is an algorithm or the block diagram. As you can see here, that there is a set speed, there is an actual speed, the error is given to the speed controller, and then we have a sleep regulator mechanism which will try to regulate the speed in order to control the amount of current. And when it is combined with the total mechanical speed, the mechanical speed plus sleep speed gives you the synchronous speed. This synchronous speed is given to the volt per hertz profile. So we get voltage and frequency. That makes it a volt per hertz drive. So uh, the inverter, which is actually the hardware part, and there is an induction motor. But the entire control algorithm uh, is now accommodated in a single chip, and that is our TMS320F28335 controller. So today, I am going to address one of the controllers in C2000 series, and that is TMS320F28335. Of course, we can go for other controllers as per our demand, but this is the most widely employed controllers. So this entire algorithm is executed in a single chip, and that is why it makes the drive or any other application compact as well as reliable. Now, what is expected from this DSP controller? Because different controllers come with different peripherals and different features. So it is not necessary that we can use any controller for any application. That we must take into the consideration, right? We need to choose the microcontroller depending on our application. Now, what are the expectation from this application as well as other applications which we discussed? That is one, that should be a microcontroller with faster processing power, right? It should have a very fast processing power. Second, the same controller should have ability to acquire signal from sensors. That means the analog to a precise analog to digital converter should be on chip. On chip means the IDC should be part of the chip. Third, the controller should be able to generate high frequency PWM signals. Now, the generation of PWM signal is not as straightforward as it seems because it is bit tricky, right? So the controller should have a dedicated hardware which will take care of generation of high frequency PWM signals. Now, this high frequency PWM signals can range from anywhere between 50 hertz or 100 hertz, and they can also go up to 50 kilohertz or even 100 kilohertz as we have tested. So 50 kilohertz, that means 50,000 hertz. So the controller which is able to generate this high frequency is not commonly found. Of course, many students, they use Arduino for PWM generation, but then the capacity of Arduino or some other chips, they are restricted to 780 hertz or 1000 hertz or maybe even up to 2000 hertz. But here we are talking about one controller which is capable of generating 10 kilohertz with the accuracy, because we need accuracy of at least 1%. That means if our command is to generate 50% duty cycle signal, then the controller should be able to synthesize 50% duty cycle. This is expected. Third, it should be able to sense the motor speed. Now, how this sensing motor speed is different than sensing some other signals like voltage and current. So motor speed is normally measured with encoders. We all know that we use encoders to measure the motor speed. Now, these encoders generate pulses. It is actually a high frequency pulse train. For example, one encoder that we have employed, it generates 9600 frequency of pulse for 1400 RPM. So that means we should be able to determine the speed of the motor with this high frequency pulses, right? And that should be a dedicated hardware unit for this. At the same time, this is the mandatory requirement for any controller nowadays, and that is faster communications. That it should be able to communicate with other HMI interface or any other interface in a very simple and fast manner, right? So one controller that addresses all our needs is one of the controller is this TMS320F2335, and that's why I'm going to discuss about this. Now, let us have a look at features, because we cannot directly determine any controller without knowing its features. So there are a few features. One is that there is a C2X. This is a common trademark architecture from TI Texas Instrument. It is a 32-bit digital signal controller, and because this CPU, this is actually a CPU, and because this CPU supports DSP processing power, and that's why it is called DSP controller, right? So it has a multiplier, it has timers, it has real-time JTAG interface, it has 32-bit floating point unit. We will talk about 30 floating point unit later. And then there is a read, modify, write type of atomic ALU. So everything is combined in one. That is part of our ALU. In addition to this, we have ample memory, that is 512 kilobytes of flash and 68 kilobytes of RAM. In addition to it, we have boot ROM also. And this entire controller is managed by the modified Harvard architecture. And then there is a peripheral bus. Now, which type of peripheral and what features we have? So we have IEEE 754 single precision floating point unit. That means the CPU in 28335 can process floating point numbers also. And this is the advantage because we know that in all control system we process the algorithms in real time, and that should support floating point numbers, right? And we have 256 kilo words, 16 means words, 256 kilo words of flash memory, and 32 kilo words of single access RAM. In addition to this, we have a boot ROM. Now, actually, this boot ROM has two applications, but I'm not talking about the first one. It decides the boot of the controller. That means where the controller will start execution. We will not talk about this in detail, but yes, there is one feature of boot ROM, and that is mathematical tables. These mathematical tables are sine tables, cos tables, tan tables, exponentials, and others. That means we can uh, calculate or we can obtain a particular sine or cosine from these tables. And this greatly reduces the burden on the controller, because as we know that when we calculate the sine function, it takes lot of time in execution. So here we have a mathematical table which is pre-stored, and we can utilize this table to fetch any value of sine or cos or others. In addition to this, we have 18 PWM outputs. 18 PWM outputs means we have nearly 12 PWM, let us say. With this 12 PWM, we can control two inverters simultaneously. That means if we have, let us say, a back-to-back converter type of topology, or we have a three-level topology, we can easily control that inverter using this 18 PWM output. We have 6 event capture inputs. Uh, they are just opposite of the PWM. Then we have a two quadrature encoder interfaces. What it means is that we can easily measure the speed of two motors simultaneously, right? This quadrature encoder pulse unit, QEP, this is mainly used for measurement of speed in the motor. Then we have a 12-bit ADC, and there are 16 channels. The meaning of channel here is that one channel can measure signal from one sensor. So if we have 16 channels, that means we can measure three-phase voltages, three-phase currents, and other three-phase current. That will make only 9 signals. And we have up to 16 channels, right? In addition to this, we have 88 individually programmable multiplex GPIO pins. So we can use this GPIOs also for many of our applications. In addition to this, there are standard communication interfaces like serial programmable interface, serial communication interface, MAC BSP, I2C, and CAN. Now, what is floating point processor and why it is unique and why it is different than others? So a floating point processor is something which can process the floating point numbers according to IEEE standards. Now here we have a 32-bit floating point processor. That means we have a 1 bit specified for sine, that is S. There are 8 bits for exponents. Exponents, that means the power. And 23 bits for mantissa, and that is our fraction. So we can write any number in binary and as a binary fractional number using this floating point processor. Remember, we have to write, let us say it is, if it is 0.5, then we have to write it as 2 raised to minus 1, right? So that can be handled using this floating point processors. And it has the advantage. What is the advantage? That we have exponent which gives large dynamic range. We have exponent ranging from 0 to 255, right? It's a huge number. So we can arrange almost any number. We can realize almost any number with this floating point processor. And because we have 23 bits for Mantisa, we have enough accuracy also. But let's, okay, now consider the standard multiplication operation, because we are talking about a complex control algorithm here. So that means we are going to do a lot of multiplication, divisions, and additions and subtractions, right? These are four basic operations on any number. Now consider a standard multiply operation like k is equal to I into I. So we have multiplied two numbers, I into I. Now let us say these are two floating point numbers. So if we process this in different controllers, then what will happen? Let us say if I and I both are integer, and we are using a fixed point processor. Almost all processors that we use, like 8051 or Arduino or others, they all are fixed point processors, right? So if they can process fixed point numbers like integer numbers, then the processor, standard processor, will take uh, it has a 3 core size. That means it will occupy 3 words, and with clock cycles of 6.67 nanosecond, that is the clock cycle of 235, it will take 3 cycles only. Yes. Now in a fixed point processor, if you try to multiply a floating point number, then the size of the code will become 89 words, and cycles required will become 112. This is actually a huge amount of execution time, right? And on the contrary, if we have floating point hardware, as we have in 28335, then the code size will be only 9 words, and the time required to execute will be 6.67 nanosecond. Now, with into 5. So with, you can compare this with fixed point processors. For multiplication, we have 112 cycles, and with floating point hardware in 28335, we have only 5 cycles, which means we can do faster processing in minimum time. But yes, remember, there are disadvantages associated with floating point representation of a number, and that is the precision. Now let us consider GPIO. We will see all features of 28335 one by one. Let us consider GPIO first. Here, as I mentioned, we have 88 numbers of GPIO, right? We have 88 numbers of GPIO. Just wait if you have a query. Okay, a few of the participants had a query at the start. So our moderator, Professor Dinesh, is going to address all of them. Well, so we have a GPIO, which is multiplexed. We know that because of limitation on number of pins. By the way, 28335 has 176 pins, and we are trying to accommodate number of features with that 176 pin. So we have to multiplex IO with a number of peripherals also, right? So here we have a little bit complex configuration where on one hand we have a GPIO. So any IO with out and in, these are buffers. So with out and in will be attached to the here 00. Then there will be peripheral 1, peripheral 2, and peripheral 3, right? There are direction buffers with which you can control the direction of the IO. For example, you can configure this as an output pin. You can also configure it as input pin, right? Okay. Now, all these green are actually control registers. That means they determine the behavior of the IO or peripheral. For example, if you want to set output pin, or you want to clear the output pin, or you want to toggle the output pin, that will be given to the IO bit, and then the IO pin will behave accordingly, right? Now, talking about this multiplexing, so how it is controlled. So we have two registers, general purpose multiplex 1 and general purpose multiplex 2. This X means it can be A, B, C, D, E. So here we have two registers which control that which IO or peripheral will be connected to the pin, right? For example, if we set bit to 00, GPIO will be selected. If you set bit to 01, peripheral 1 will be selected. If you set 10, peripheral 2 will be selected. And if you set 11, peripheral 3 will be selected. So let us say we have selected GPIO, then this 00 GPIO, through GPIO, we can give the output to the pin, right? So here we have the example. There is one pin GPIO 1. Now GPIO 1 is multiplexed with EPWM1B, that is one feature of PWM, E capture 6, that is capture unit, and MFSRB, that is related to MAC buffer SRB. So here we have multiple functions attached to the single pin. Now, and we can select which one we want to use at a time. In addition to this, we have input qualification unit also, and then few internal pull-ups also. We know that we require a pull-up for any IO pin to work satisfactorily. So everything is available in the single unit. That is, and this is inside the chip. Now, what is the meaning of input qualification? So whenever we use any pin as a IO pin, or particularly input pin, then the pin, there will be a signal, input signal on that IO pin, and the signal will be, of course, it will be having value between 0 and 5 volt. So there will be a 0 and 5 volt, but there may be, now the gap between these two is actually very, very small, because these processors or controllers are 3.3 volt. So anything above 1 volt will be treated as 1, and anything above 1 will be treated as 0. So any noise, random noise, can also be treated as a change in the input, and that's why we require input qualification. Wait a minute, I think we have one query here. Sorry for the interruption, because a number of participants are having some queries related to joining. So we are trying to address those queries also. Well, okay. Okay. Now, this input qualification means that there will be a clock, and we will try to synchronize the input with that clock. So for example, we have this kind of input, and then we determine the input qualification. That means if the signal changes and it remains for that level for at least some samples like 3 or 6 or 12, then only it will be treated as a change in the input signal. For example, here there are a lot of noises, but what we have done, we have not considered the noise or the change which is less than 3 clock period. So then it will not be considered as a change. So here you can see that we have I have shown this for qualification for 3 samples. That means, let us say there is a change from 0 to 1, and that 1 remains for S1 for 3 qualification period, 1, 2 and 3, right? Then it will be considered as 1. If this signal falls to 0 before than that, it will not be treated as a change. What can be the applications of general purpose input output in this controller? So one, we can control an indicator LED. This is not the LED as we think. It is not LED light or lamp, but it is actually the indicator LED. So we can control the indicator LED just to show that whether a particular function is working or not. Second, we can use this to control a relay or the stepper motor. Of course, this controller is not designed for stepper motor, but anyway, we can use it, right? Okay, there are two features applicable to power electronic applications, and they are control of SCR. So we can use GPIO to control SCRs in AC-DC and AC-AC converter, and that too with precision, right? And fourth is control of inverter in hysteresis current control technique. Those who are involved with the control of current control of the inverter or the inverter, they can use this feature. For example, whenever the band change the signal, whenever the current exceeds the hysteresis band, you can toggle the value of the GPIO. So those who know about the SCC technique, there we can use this GPIO. We have used this for SCC, and we found that it is working quite satisfactorily. The next and one of the important feature, because of which this 28335 and C2000 series has become popular in power electronic applications, is the EPWM module. So first of all, let us understand those who belong to those who are in early undergraduate program, they would like to know what is PWM. So PWM is actually the scheme to represent a signal as a sequence of pulses. And what happens? The pulse width, this pulse width is proportional to the instantaneous signal amplitude. So let us say the signal amplitude is high, then the pulse width will be high. If the signal amplitude is very low, then the pulse width will be low. And if you try to filter out, ultimately you will get the same signal. And the beauty is that the PWM energy, that is the energy in one cycle, is actually equal to the original signal energy. Right? If you calculate mathematically, then both the energy will come out to be same. So we can use this feature in inverter, as well as inverters are widely used in motors as well as other applications. So we can use this feature in all those applications. But to realize, as I say, to realize the PWM is not that easy with the digital controller. What we need, so there should be a timer. Now, I have considered that I want to control an inverter. So let us say it's an up-down timer. So up-down timer generates a triangular waveform. If you use only up timer, it will be a sawtooth one, right? So there is an up-down timer and there is an original signal. Now the value, instantaneous value of the original signal will be stored in the compare register, and there will be instantaneous value of the timer. Both will be compared with a compare logic. So we know that in digital electronics, we have studied about the comparator. We can use the same comparator here, right? And then we can mention that whether the signal is greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. So then to decide this, we have an action qualifier. This action qualifier will decide that whenever this compare register value is equal to the up down timer value, what will happen, whether the signal will go high or it will go low, or what will happen, right? Now the internal block diagram of EPWM is like this. We have a clock prescaler. The clock, of course, the clock prescaler is required to run the timer. Okay, we need a clock frequency to run the timer, and so we determined out of the system clock out, which is 150 megahertz, how much we want to divide, whether we want to treat 75 megahertz or we want to treat it as 37.5 megahertz. Then that the clock is given to the counter, or you can say timer, and then there are two compare registers. Why two compare registers? Because this is one EPWM. One EPWM is capable of generating two signals, signal A and signal B, which means each EPWM is able to generate two independent A and B signals. Now, there is a compare logic which will compare the value of compare register with the timer, and then it will give the output that yes, there is a change or there is a comparison in and the comparison has yielded something. Now the action qualifier will decide that what it should do, right? For example, here you can see that we are using the timer in up down mode. So it starts from 0, goes up to period register or a period value, and period value to 0 again, right? This acts as a triangular carrier in the inverter. And then we have the value of the reference. Let us say value A is this and value B is this. Now for up down counter, one value is encountered actually twice in one cycle, one during the up and one during the down, right? So we can configure the EPWM action qualifier such that whenever there is a comparison, that means the value of compare register A is equal to timer, then there should be compare A up, and then it should go from 0 to 1. Next time the timer and compare values are same, we will go from high to low. Similarly, there is EPWM B, and here value is this. So whenever there is a compare match between compare register B and timer, then the signal will go high, and next time we have configured it such that it will go low. We can also set it in any way. For example, it is earlier high and then it goes low and then high again. So that is your choice. You can configure the way you wish. Now, because we are using this controller for a number of applications, like we can use it for DC-DC converter, which is actually a very huge market. We can use this for DC-AC inverter also, right? As well as AC-DC converters and inverters and renewable energy applications, electric vehicles. In electric vehicles also, nowadays we are using these controllers. And by the way, most of the laboratories, most of the research institutions, they are using this controller. So there are three modes: count up and count down mode. These two modes are actually asymmetrical mode, and they are widely used for DC-DC converters. Whereas the up-down mode it acts as an isosceles triangular waveform, and it is used in inverter. You can see how we can generate independent PWM using this EPWM unit. Here, these are the waveforms we have captured in our laboratory, where EPWM1A is set like this. This just matches here, right? We cannot see triangular waveform in the DSO because it is actually operating very, very fast, and inside, and it is happening inside the controller. So because it is happening inside the controller, we are not able to see the timer. Okay, but we can see the PWM output here, right? So you can see the EPWM1A, it goes, it is actually 0, and then it goes high, 5 volt, and again it goes low after some time. Starting from here to here, it is 100 microsecond per division. So we are having 100, 200, 300, 400, and nearly 500, right? 500, that means the carrier frequency is 2 kilohertz. This is 500 microsecond. So if I'm not wrong, it will be 2 kilohertz frequency. At the same time, EPWM1B is generating another signal which is going only this much. Now you can see that the duty cycle of C2 is 7.2%. It is 7.2%, and duty cycle C1 is 77.2%. So you can see with what amount of precision we can generate the PWM signal, right? Normally, it is not possible to get accuracy more than 1%. But with this controller, we are able to generate the signal with 77.2% duty cycle as well. These signals are, by the way, they are generated for unipolar PWM. Unipolar PWM scheme is used for single phase inverters. Then we have 3-phase PWM generation. This is sine PWM generation. So as you can see, EPWM1A, 2A, and 3A. We have used 3 EPWM modules. There are 6 such EPWM modules. As I have mentioned, we have 6 EPWM modules, and 6 EPWM modules are able to generate 12 PWM signals. So you can see the variation as a sine. This 2 millisecond per division means the entire window covers 20 millisecond. 20 millisecond means one cycle, one fundamental cycle. So we can see the variation of the duty cycle according to the sine here. Same is for EPWM2 and EPWM3. And look at the peak. This, it is here, it is here, and it is here. That means we are getting 3-phase PWM signals for which are 120-degree electrically apart. And with this, the output of inverter will look like this, where the upper trace is this one, upper one is showing line-to-line voltage, and the lower one is showing the line current. And with sine PWM, we are able to generate a nearly sinusoidal output current, right? Of course, there will be some noise here. And yes, there is another feature with this controller provides, and that is the deadband generation, right? Deadband generation is visible here. What is the deadband? We know that the upper switch and the lower switch of the inverter cannot be turned on simultaneously. If that happens, then there will be dead short circuit. If you want to avoid that, there has to be some amount of upper switch and lower switch are complementary, by the way. Because they are complementary, so whenever one switch goes from 0 to 1, the other switch should go from 1 to 0. And you can see that here also, right? 2 signals for one leg of inverter. One is going from 0 to 1, and another is going from 1 to 0. But we cannot make them complement at the same time. Otherwise, it will result into the dead short circuit in the inverter, right? To avoid that, we are generating the dead band, and the value between the two cursors is actually the dead band, and we are able to precisely generate the dead band using this controller, which means we can avoid unnecessary hardware required for the dead band, right? And that's why this controller is being widely used in the inverter and other applications, power electronic applications. Now, another feature is the analog to digital converter. right? The analog to digital converter of 28335 is a 12-bit converter. So it means that we have 12-bit resolution of analog to digital converter. What it means? There are 16, okay, we will see about it, but there are 16 analog input channels. As I said, there can be three-phase voltages, again three-phase voltages, three-phase currents, and three-phase currents. So overall, it can take up to 6 voltage sensors, 6 current sensors, still using only 12 channels, whereas we have 16 channels, right? Then voltage range is 0 to 3. That means we must apply the voltage between 0 to 3. If you apply voltage more than 3 volt, it will result into the damage of the chip, right? Okay, with this, the input voltage, which can be determined from the given particular digital value, is given by this equation. But of course, we are not interested in this. We only need to know that 3 is the upper value, 0 is the lower value, D is the digital binary number, and 12 bit, so it is going to be 2 raised to 12 minus 1. This is the equation for ADC, right? It's a common equation used in all ADC. From that, we can find out the digital number or digital binary value from a given V in. So let us say we have V in into 4095, that is 2 raised to 12, 4096 minus 1, 4095 divided by 3. So let us say we are providing 0 volt at the input of the ADC, then the output digital value ideally will be 0. If we provide 1.5, which is the center value, then it will give you 1.5 into 4095 divided by 3. It will be 4095 divided by 2. It will give you 2048, which is the digital number, right? And if you provide 3 volt, 3 and 3 will be cancelled. You will get 4095, right? Maximum conversion rate for this ADC is 12.5 mega samples per second. If you take this inverse, that means the time required to process one sample, it is 80 nanosecond. So 80 nanosecond is actually a very, very small value, which means you can easily convert any analog value into the digital number in minimum time. Now, of course, this is actually very hypothetical. When we go for it, then this value should be 300 to 500 nanosecond practically. Otherwise, the output will not be appropriate, right? So we go up to 500 nanosecond, right? The resolution of this ADC, it's 0.7326 milliwatt. I have counted this resolution from this equation, that is V in is equal to so and so. So 0.7326, that means we can sense a value anything between 0 to 1 millivolt, right? Now, the block diagram in cascaded mode, there are few modes of the ADC operations. One of the mode is cascaded mode. That means we treat the entire ADC as one unit, and normally we recommend to treat the entire ADC as one unit. So then we have 16 channels which are divided into two subgroups. One subgroup is ADC A and another subgroup is ADC B. ADC A has 8 channels, ADC B has 8 channels. Both are actually multiplexed. So multiplex means we can, of course, we have 16 channels, but we have only one 12-bit A to D converter. So at a time, we can only convert one signal from analog to digital. But this is happening so fast that we do not bother whether one signal is being processed or the number of signals are being processed, right? So we have sample and hold for B, and then all of them are multiplexed for single analog to digital converter core. There is an auto sequencer. We don't need to go much into the detail, but a very simple meaning is that the auto sequencer is actually sequencing which channel will be converted first. For example, we have connected voltage sensors on B0, B1 and B2 and current sensors on A0, A1 and N2. We want to process B0, B1 and B2 first and then A0, A1 and A2. Then we can change the sequence. By default, the sequence is 0, 1, 2, 3. That means A0, A1, A2, A3 up to A7 and then B0, B1, B2 up to B7. But we can change this sequence with the auto sequencer. Of course, the auto sequencer will start when there is a startup conversion signal, right? In ADC, there are two signals which are very important. One is the startup conversion signal, which tells ADC that when it should start the conversion from analog to digital. And then whenever the conversion is complete, it will issue an interrupt. An interrupt is here termed as end of conversion signal. So interrupt will go to the CPU core, and whenever this interrupt comes, we obtain all the results from the result registers. So we have 16 dedicated result registers, different registers, and we can obtain values of digital conversion from these registers, right? So the features of ADC are up to 16 auto conversions, sequential and simultaneous. What is the meaning of this? We can process either one channel at a time, or we can convert two channels at a time, right? That means one channel from A and one channel from B. That is called two channels at a time. Okay. Then we have 16 individual addressable result registers and multiple trigger sources. That means startup conversion. One important feature is that we can receive the startup conversion signal from EPWM unit. Now, EPWM is used to control the power electronic converter. And if we can synchronize this EPWM with the ADC, that means the entire control algorithm of the power electronic will run in tandem, right? Now, how the conversion happens? So we have upper 12 bits occupied. Remember, the ADC is 12-bit ADC, but the result register which we use, it will be a 16-bit value, right? So what we do, our LSB starts from 4 and it goes up to 15, right? Input voltage 3 will be converted to FFF, 1.5 will be converted to 7FFF. Okay, now one point that always puzzles us if we are beginner, that is, my current sensor is producing bipolar output. That means starting from 0.5 volt, it goes up to minus 0.5. But my ADC is unipolar because it only treats the signal between 0 to 3. So how do I convert my bipolar signal into unipolar? For example, the output of current sensor can range from minus 0.5, 1.5 to 0.5. How do I convert this into unipolar, that is 0 to 3? So simply, we need to use an adder circuit plus buffer circuit like this, which we have used successfully. And then the signal can be given to the ADC in. And a very simple code we write here, and that is whenever we receive the output, we simply subtract the equivalent value of 1.5, which is 07FF, and we treat this as offset, right? This is the program for nulling the offset, which is added earlier. This is the example of three-phase voltage signal measurement and running the PLL algorithm. Okay, here what we have done, we have three-phase voltage signals, VAN, VBN, and VCN. These are output of sensors. That means these are directly given to the DSP controller. And then we have run one phase loop algorithm. Those who are aware of inverters, solar inverters, as well as grid connected applications, you might see that there is a PLL or phase lock loop in your algorithm. This phase lock loop actually determines two things. One, and that is the frequency of the supply, because the frequency of the supply can be 49.8. Here you can see it is 49.91, right? So it cannot be only 50, right? It can be anything between 49 to 51. So that's why we are using PLL, and you can see that PLL 0 degree is completely synchronized with the 0 degree of the um, is completely synchronized with the 90 degree of the phase A. Okay, so this is how we can use the DSP controller for different applications. Now there is another feature which I would like to share in very short time. Of course, uh, there will be a small glitch, and then I will. Sorry. Yeah, this is the code for analog to digital converter, right? The good thing is that uh, this software or the tool, we can say IDE, is actually free of cost. It is kind of open source, right, for students and for faculties. So you can use this, and we have all types of codes readily available with us, right? We only need to utilize that code properly in order to generate our application. Now, I invite the questions from different participants. If you have any question, please send us your questions. Uh, any question, please let us know. We have last 5 minutes. Okay, no questions. So I think we are done. Any question from our faculty members? Any question from our faculty members? No. Okay. So on behalf of electrical engineering department, um, I thank all the participants who have attended, and especially Professor Dinesh Sabadia and Professor Amit Ved for their kind support. And here I end my session. If you have any query or any suggestion, please let us know. Yes, one important announcement. Um, we are going to issue certificates for this webinar. For that, I will send you a link soon, right? You only need to fill in your details, and please write your college name if you are a student, and if you are an employee or owner, please write your organization name properly. And I will send the certificate accordingly. Thank you all.